I move that the members of the Planning Commission certify, 1, that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under Chapter 37, Title 2.2 of the Code of Virginia, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which a closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, and considered by the Planning Commission.
Second?
Seconded by Commissioner Siegel. All in favor? All right, it's unanimous. Thank you, and welcome to the January meeting of the Planning Commission. On our agenda tonight, we're going to be discussing an amendment to Site Plan 193 for the Y Hotel, and then discussing some of our Planning Commission kind of organizational matters as well. Before I start, though, and ask the clerk to call our first item, I do want to acknowledge that former Commissioner Karen Kuhn-Morris has passed away. She had served this body for a number of years and was also very active on the Site Plan Review Committee after she stopped being a planning commissioner, and worked with many of us at the dais. So I do want to pass along our condolences to her family. There will be a commemoration of her life on January 26th at 2 p.m. at UUCA. So I encourage anybody in this room or watching at home who knew Karen and served with her to pass along condolences to her family, pass along kind of mention of her good work for this community, but also if they did work with her, encourage those folks to attend the commemoration of her life again at 2 p.m. on January 26th at UUCA. So with that, Madam Clerk, can you please call the first item?
Our first item this evening is site plan number 193 for the Y Hotel for a temporary conversion of up to 175 units from residential to hotel use located at 700 North Randolph Street. We have Adam Watson, our planning staff, to present this item this evening.
Mr. Watson, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening and Happy New Year. This is the Y Hotel Ballston Quarter site plan amendment for a temporary hotel use. So jumping into the location, this is located at 700 North Randolph Street. The footprint of the residential tower of Ballston Quarter is what is outlined on the image in front of you. The star indicates the approximate location of the entrance to the residential tower from North Randolph Street. So a little bit of site background. This residential project is part of the larger Ballston Quarter redevelopment that was approved in 2015. There are 3 components there: the office project, the mall project, and then this comes under the residential project, which is still under construction. It was for 406 residential units, about 5,000 square feet of retail, and 290 parking spaces. The site designation is, under the GLUP, is medium office apartment hotel, and the corresponding zoning district is the CO 2.5 mixed use districts. Both districts permit hotel use. So coming to the proposal, this is a temporary conversion of up to 175 units from residential to hotel use. It's a temporary use for up to 2 years, assuming county board action in January. That would be through January 2021. The units will revert to residential use as the building leases out. 175 units is approximately 43% of the total units in the building. As I'm sure the applicant will speak to, Y Hotel staff plans to be on site 24/7 and also proposes that the guests be permitted to use the residential building amenities and parking. We've engaged with some community feedback from our local civic associations. This site is in Ashton Heights. We reached out to Ashton Heights, Ballston, Virginia Square, Bluemont, Buckingham, as well as the Ballston bid. We heard back from the top 3 that I've shown here on this slide. The feedback is general support for the proposal, although they have requested that on-street parking in front of the entrance on North Randolph Street be augmented to short-term parking instead of 2-hour parking. The concern comes from parking drop-off pickup for rideshare and taxi. We've been engaging in some back and forth response with the community on this. The staff response at this juncture is that once this building and this streetscape are constructed, the applicant can apply for short-term parking, 15, 30-minute drop-off loading through a process that's covered independently of this site plan amendment. And my understanding, I don't want to speak entirely for them, but my understanding is that Forest City has expressed, the underlying property owner of the residential building has expressed some interest in having short-term parking loading there, not just for Y Hotel, but beyond that. And we did not get a response from Buckingham or Ballston Bid formally on this proposal. So in terms of the staff review of this proposal, we support this proposal. The hotel use is consistent, as I mentioned earlier, with both the GLUP and the zoning districts. The proposal doesn't involve any addition of any GFA to the building. It's a temporary use that wouldn't alter the long-term residential use that was envisioned and improved under the site plan project. It would also allow for some faster occupancy of the building, which would assist in the opening of a regional shopping center, which is the Ballston Quarter Mall. From a transportation perspective, there's an extensive sidewalk network and public transit options that are very close to the site. The hotel use parking ratio that they're proposing is the same as what was approved for the residential, which is 0.7 spaces. We anticipate that the parking demand for the hotel use is going to be lower than the approved residential parking ratio. Additional parking is available in the Ballston parking garage. And as I mentioned earlier, there's also on-street parking directly in front. We are proposing 2 condition revisions. That's to condition 32 and 42. Those are transportation-related conditions, and it's really mostly a technical thing to just clarify that the hotel use is acceptable for using the parking in the residential parking garage. The smart trip benefits under the TMP apply to the residential lessees, not to the hotel guests. And that we need a liaison for communicating with staff on transportation matters. The new condition, condition 64, is what sets the terms or the parameters for the hotel use itself, which governs up to 175 for no more than 2 years, establishes a tracking mechanism and reporting function to Zoning and Inspection Services Division on which units are temporary hotel use and which are residential. And then again, has that on-site liaison for operations and compliance. So with that, we are recommending that the county board adopt the site plan amendment ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Does that conclude your staff's presentation?
It does.
Thank you. Mr. Pritchard.
Good evening, everybody. Evan Pritchard from Venable here on behalf of the applicant, Forest City and Y Hotel. I'm going to let Jason Feuden from Y Hotel do most of the heavy lifting tonight. I think Adam's done a good job of covering all the zoning issues. As you can see, this is a short-term use that we think is fully compatible with the underlying residential use. Is going to be a good way to help support the growing retail presence at the mall and bring users to the site and help generate a little bit of tax revenue for the 14 to 16 month period that the residential building takes to lease up. He'll be ready to answer any operational questions after he goes through his presentation. And as was alluded to, Sarah Ford from Forest City is here representing the building owner and sort of the long-term vision to answer any questions along those lines. So that, take it away.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Pritchard. Mr. Feuden.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Jason Feuden. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Y Hotel, turnkey pop-up short-term service department operator. We were actually founded in Arlington County back in 2016 now, and we became an independent venture-backed company in the summer of 17, and this would be our 4th project. So if you want to change the slide, for Ballston Quarter, I don't think I need to run through this since you guys are all familiar and staff did a great job running through it, other than to point out, generally we expect a building of this size to lease up in 14 to 16 months. So that's about how long we would expect to be in the building. If it goes faster, we're there less time. If it goes longer, we're there longer, but in all cases, under 2 years. And in this case, it's under 2 years from board approval, not under 2 years from opening. We would expect to open in April or May of this year. The next slide. So I'm assuming most of you haven't heard of our model. Basically, we put to use the vacancy of new apartments during lease up. So when a developer like Forest City, delivers a high-rise building for rent. The construction type necessitates that it all delivers at once. Right? You can't be under heavy construction with residents in the building, and that means there's hundreds of vacant units. There's a natural cadence to filling up an apartment building with long-term renters. And actually, you don't really want to go faster than 12 months because then you're lumpy on the turns. You want to have a consistent kind of set of leases that roll in the project. And so there's just a natural way to fill up a building. That is highly inefficient, obviously, because there's empty units. And so what we do is we look to put that vacancy to work for kind of all involved, for the county, for residents, and for the developer. We furnish, thus far, in most cases, 100 or more units. We train and onboard hospitality staff. A lot of them come from the traditional hospitality world, the Marriotts, the Hiltons, the Hyatts of the world. And then we go about putting that vacancy to work. So we have guests stay with us, generally 3 to 6 nights, although some people stay a little bit longer. When we have relocations and renovations, residencies, traveling nurses. But basically, we have people stay with us. We end up providing an amenity to the residents. In most of our projects, residents get some free cleaning services, free room nights. The developer has instant activation of the building, which is particularly important for retail. We saw at the Bartlett in Pentagon City, which was our first, that we drove a lot of business to Commonwealth Joe as they were starting to build a brand, which was really cool. And the city, or the county in this case, gets found tax dollars and found jobs. So we generally hire from the community because they know the community best. We like to highlight what's going on in that community. So in our Baltimore pop-up, when people arrive, they get Utz chips because Utz is a Baltimore product. In DC, we have Commonwealth Joe because it's a DC Metro coffee. In Arlington and specifically in Ballston, we'll look to the nearby providers of food and artwork and everything else to make sure that's reflective in our pop-up. If you want to go to the next slide. Our first pop-up was at the Bartlett in Pentagon City. In another life, I was an employee at Vornado, and we did that as an internal project to see if, this makes sense on paper, but did it make sense in real life? It did. We had over 20% of all the residents have someone stay with us in the first 4 months, which we found to be really exciting. That building filled up quickly. We were there just under 5 months. And today, we're at the time at the Bartlett, we were not 24/7 on site because of the small number of units, but we have, as a business, evolved. So today we are 24/7 on site. Our team manages all guest interactions, arrivals, check-ins, questions about where to go for an Italian sandwich, all those things. We run all of the hospitality functions independent of the owner, so that is a front of house for us. We call them hospitality ambassadors. It's more of a hosted experience, and so unlike the formality of a hotel, it's like staying with a friend of a friend. So you check in a unit in the building, and you end up getting to know the people that are there, and you give them the keys to your unit, and we say, stay like you live here. It's kind of our little motto. And so we run that front of house. The heart of house, the cleaning, is called the fresh team. And so they're the ones responsible for turning all the units. And then we do all the linens and terry that you would see in a traditional hospitality setting. When we leave, we hand the units back in a phased way to the developer. So obviously, in this case with 175 units, Forest City doesn't need them all at once. So we probably start handing them back 20 to 30 units a month, the pace that they're leasing the building. And we hand them back in the same condition we got them. So to a partner like Forest City, they get the benefit of the units like we weren't there, and that interim activity. Alex, we'll go to the next slide. So how does that physically manifest itself in the building? There's no physical changes to the outside of the building. There's no structural changes to the building generally. We have 2 operating units in the building. One is our front of house. It's a 2-bedroom unit where we do check-ins. And one is our back of house, and that's where we realized we need lockers for employees and tables. It's where we post all the rules about being an employer. It's where we store the linens and terry. And in the front of house units where we do check-ins, and that's where we are 24/7. And then back of house is where we operate out of. For guests that come stay with us, the process is pretty straightforward. They book us on either on our website, they can call us, they can book us on the OTAs like the Expedias of the world or the HomeAways. When they book with us, they get a confirmation email that explains how to get into the building, and they get another confirmation email hopefully they're reading. And then when they arrive, they're given access to the building. They come up to our unit, our check-in unit, and that's where we check them in. We take everyone's ID who's over 18 years old, so we know who's in the building at all times. We say we're your 24/7 on-site staff. We're here to service your needs. So if you have any questions, concerns, or just want to chat, we get a lot of chatters. Come on by. And that's kind of the process. We give you your keys, and you stay like you live there. Our guests and the residents, although there's a few residents at first, they interact, just like you would in common places, in a hotel, a mall, an office building. And we found it to be a really positive experience for all. We end up knowing a lot of the residents by first name as well, because they have people stay with us or they take advantage of our free cleaning program. What's our track record? We're a young company. We're 18 months old, although 24 months ago is when we opened the Bartlett under Vornado. We hire 15 to 25 employees per location. Again, we focus on hiring from the community. We obviously pay all applicable taxes, so in Arlington County, that's getting a tax number and remitting taxes monthly, just like a traditional hotel would. As part of our conditions, we have a tracking report, so the county is always aware of what units we have in service and how many. Guest parking is available on site, and it's the same as the residential spaces, although it's a less intense use. So obviously, we're not changing the parking ratio. We found at the Bartlett in Arlington, which has probably a very similar demographic mix as this, about 1 in 5 of our guests showed up with a car. And just our other Y hotels. So the Bartlett was our inaugural at 50, inaugural because it was for the presidential inauguration, and also our first hotel. We did 50 units. We opened the weekend of the presidential inauguration and had a cast of characters, as you can imagine, on both sides. And then from there, we spun out, became an independent company. We opened downtown Baltimore June of last year. That's 158 units across from Mercy Hospital. We have seen a ton of demand related to the hospital, a lot of traveling nurses, doctor residencies, and a lot of families of patients, actually. It's a great kind of interim place to be for a few weeks if someone's going through a medical emergency. Not the person staying with us, but their family. And then we opened downtown DC in Noma in October. And the mix there is more federal, Capitol Hill staffers. And we actually see a lot of international travelers who are in New York and they want to visit DC. They take the train down Union Station and stay with us. I think that wraps it up. Obviously happy to answer any questions about the operations, how it works, or really anything.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Fuden and Mr. Pritchard. I'm going to pass it off to Commissioner Siegel, who was our SPRC chair, kind of when this item was considered, and she has a kind of brief report.
Just to inform my fellow commissioners that what had happened was, I think it was Mr. Pritchard proposed that we not have an SPRC since I think it was his thinking that it really wouldn't be necessary as temporary use, even though it was a major site plan amendment. With a major site plan amendment, we really are required to have an SPRC. So we met with Y Hotel, Mr. Pritchard, that is to say Commissioner Schroll and I met together, and we got a little briefing and decided that we would ask the relevant civic associations whether they wanted to have an SPRC, whether they felt it was necessary. So I think Commissioner Schroll and I both reached out to Ashton Heights, where this site is located, and the abutting civic association, which was Virginia Square, Ballston, Virginia Square. Did you reach out to Buckingham? Well, I'm trying to report as to what we did to eliminate the need for an SPRC. I do see in the report that other civic association staff reached out to other civic associations, so that carried on. But I think Commissioner Schroll and I wanted to just satisfy ourselves that the abutting and civic association where this project would be located felt they didn't need one. And they polled their members and came back to us saying they really didn't think that it was necessary. So I wanted to make that clear. In a major site plan amendment, normally we automatically have an SPRC. The request was, would you consider not having one? Is it really necessary? We've gone through this kind of business model before with the Bartlett, as was mentioned, and so I just wanted to put that on the record, that not only did staff reach out, but we, the commission itself, the leadership, reached out and came to that conclusion.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Siegel. All right, so are there any kind of questions on that? Yeah, okay. All right, open it up to commissioners. Did this go to Transportation Commission?
No, it did not.
Okay, thank you. All right, and no other commissions heard it. All right, Madam Clerk, do we have any public speakers? Okay. All right, now the matter is before the commission. Any questions? Commissioner Weir and then Commissioner McSweeney.
I have actually a handful, so I'll just start with one and then I'll hand it over to you and you might get to the next one. I guess my first question is for staff. I understand that in addition to the 175 units here, there's also a request for 160 units to be converted for Y Hotel use at the site under construction at George Mason Drive and Columbia Pike. Beyond those 335 housing units, are there any other pending similar conversions that are currently in the pipeline?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm aware of the Centro one. I'm not sure how many units it is, but that's the only one that I know of. Yeah.
Commissioner McSweeney.
Thank you. My questions are related to the parking. I did note that on slide 8 of your presentation, Mr. Fuden, you indicated that there was a ratio of about 1 to 5 hotel guests who actually had a car. Was that specific to the Bartlett, or was that all of your properties? Was that an average of all your properties, the ones in DC and Baltimore included?
That's specific to the Bartlett, which we thought was the most kind of like group to this. We happy to provide it. I don't know offhand what we did in DC and Baltimore. My guess is DC's lower and Baltimore's higher. We see a lot of travelers to Baltimore from Philadelphia and the DC area.
No, thank you. I think that is appropriate, and I just wanted to make sure it was the Bartlett, and I had heard you correctly. My question then about the parking is, I understand that any overflow can be picked up in the Ballston Mall garage, right? The idea is that anybody who can't park under the current apartment building will go into the, or do they all park in Ballston?
There's parking on site for the residential units at Point 7, and that's in line with a lot of other projects that have been approved. And as a further stopgap measure, you know, there is we understand from staff there is additional capacity in the garage if we have a flood of parkers and, you know, we need that relief valve. But the plan is for most residents and their guests to park under the residential building once the building is fully leased up.
So as a person maybe taking advantage of your hotel and coming and not finding a parking space, what would be the mechanism where I know to go park in the Ballston garage? Will you have some communication ahead of time, or?
So I guess, so two pieces. So one, it would be very surprising if we had an overflow issue because the building is mostly empty and we're at a really low parking ratio. But if there was some kind of like car event and everyone drove, the way it works is when they arrive, they call up to us, they arrive at the garage, and it goes directly to the on-site team, say, hey, I'm here for Y Hotel. If we did have a parking overflow issue, we'd have them park in a guest spot, and we'd bring them a fob to park in another part of the garage.
Ms. Gabor, did you want to weigh in on that at all?
I did, thank you. Again, my name is Joanne Gabor, I'm with DES. And I think I just wanted to sort of reiterate what the applicant was mentioning, which is, as staff, we don't anticipate there being any need for the overflow. That was more just for information, and I know it's something we discussed when we went through the Ballston Quarter site plan, was with the 0.7 ratio for the residential, when it was only residential, if there was the need for additional parking during some sort of peak event or something, that the Ballston Mall parking garage is always available. But as the applicant indicated, we don't anticipate that need, and especially with what they're showing of a 0.2 ratio effectively for the hotel units, we especially don't anticipate the need for the overflow for the Ballston garage.
Thank you. Given the fact that parking is, of course, such a sore point, I think, with area neighborhoods, it's just really good to address it, I think, publicly. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner McSweeney. Commissioner Gearin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have questions. I have one really quick question, and then questions about the allocation of the units. So the first one is the length of the term 30 days or less, because if you were to rent a unit, you could rent it for 2 months, 4 months, a year? Okay, so that covers anyone who wants to rent for 3 days up to...
That's right. We had to ask for the major amendment for anybody who's paying for the room for 30 or fewer days.
Okay.
And then if they wanted to stay there for 45 days, Jason would probably accommodate them, at which point that would just constitute a residential lease. In the eyes
Another
of the
short
zoning.
question. Are you allowing pets in the building for renters? And if so, would you allow them for the Y Hotel?
Yes, for the renters.
Yes and yes. But our pet policy, as part of it, follows the pet policy of the apartment building, so we wouldn't have anything different from.
Okay. And then the last question I had more to do with how you'd be allocating the units for the long-term leases versus the hotel. Do you set aside, and I know this is new, do you set aside a floor and you rent those last, and those are the short-term ones? And I'm thinking of this more from a security perspective and a discussion that we had when we started to talk about Airbnb. Because as people move into the building, they become familiar with their neighbors. But you have some people who would maybe be turning over more frequently. And I'm sure you're starting to think of that. Can you give us a sense of how you address that and how that plays into the allocation of the units?
So just from a practical standpoint, we start with allocations of floors. It's just cleaner and simpler. As we wind down, there is an interaction, or could be an interaction, between residents and guests, and obviously in the common areas there's an interaction. Our experience has been that that's a really positive thing, that the people who rent in apartment buildings are looking to be in an active, fun, cool space with other active, fun, cool people. And they end up having conversations and enjoying the company of the guests and their neighbors. In DC, we do something called Wine Down on busy Fridays, where we offer free wine to both residents and guests so they can get to know each other, see who's in town, make friends. So we see that as a positive in the building.
And that's something that's open then to both the long-term and the short-term residents. So you really are trying to get everybody, okay. And to answer, I guess, my question, which might not have been that articulate, but you're renting floors at a time. So the short-term rentals will all be in one area.
At the start, we start with whole floors for the short-term rentals and whole floors for the long-term rentals.
Yeah.
As we wind down, depending on the way a building leases up, there may be some amount of commingling in the wind down phase for a short period of time. We did that at the Bartlett. We've done that at other projects, and that has not been an issue.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, yes, Commissioner Steinberger.
Hi, and you may have said this already. What's the typical length of stay for your guests, you find, or are you anticipating for Arlington if different than your other properties?
So the average length of stay is 3 to 6 nights. At the Bartlett, it was just shy of 4. So it's kind of like an extended stay hotel.
Any other questions? Commissioner Weir.
It sounds from what you're saying, this might answer one of my questions, that if lease up for the building is faster than might be anticipated, then the building would take back units that Y Hotel is using. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're a bridge. We're not meant as something to replace.
Okay, so the 175 units are not locked in with Y Hotel for the period of time?
Correct. So at the Bartlett, we had 50 units approved for up to 2 years, which ran out like 60 days ago. We haven't been there for a year and a half. So our plan is we come in, we make use of the vacancy, and then as the building fills up with residents, we hand back units kind of in chunks.
And then the other side of that question is, if lease-up goes slowly, then what, if anything, what is, maybe this is a question for staff, what is staff's thinking about whether the county would be amenable to a request to extend for another 2 years. I know you're talking about 2021, but
Yeah, I think we would have to address that when it comes. It would be a site plan amendment again, because the board would have to act, because the term is 2 years from county board action date.
we'd be back here basically having having a similar conversation.
That's correct.
Okay. I guess I have one somewhat related final question. And maybe this is mostly for the building. Does the fact that you're pursuing this partnership with Y Hotel indicate any particular bets that the building is making about trends in the residential apartment market? Or is this a partnership that's being pursued independent of any speculation about real estate trends?
I'll answer that, and Sarah, kick me if I get it wrong or you want to add, but it's totally independent. I think it's just a recognition that this concept solves a problem that the industry has had, for years, if not forever, of just when you have a building with 400+ units in it, the natural cycle of things, independent of what the economy is doing, is just 14 to 16 months for the building to fill up. And so for the reasons Jason's laid out, this is a way to not only earn some revenue for the owner, earn some revenue for the locality, but I don't know how much this was touched on in the presentation, but Jason, maybe you can talk a little bit about how it helps. It's a preview of the building. Some of the guests at Y Hotel, as I understand it, have actually signed leases in projects.
Yeah, so a percentage of our guests become residents. We have a try it before you buy it concept, where if someone's come to town and they're looking to rent a unit at a building in Arlington or DC or Fairfax, they could potentially stay at the building while they're looking and hopefully decide to sign a lease in the building. We also saw at the Bartlett, every 1,000 room nights we did, we saw a lease and a half. And so it was oftentimes from people who worked nearby, who are relocating to the area. So it's not only an activation play, but it also helps facilitate that asset, get more leases more quickly.
Thank you, Commissioner Ware. Commissioner Giacomini.
Thank you. My question is for either the applicant or staff, and I was just curious, for the basic construction of the building, do we have different code requirements for things that are considered hotels as opposed to apartment buildings, and how does that work when we sort of embed a hotel use within a residential building?
So we have had a few back and forths with ISD on that. Mostly the distinction relates to the accessible units. And we did have to make some modifications because there were some slightly more stringent requirements for ADA purposes in the hotel units that did not apply to the residential units. So, we've made those modifications.
So the width of the hallways, the exits, all of that,
All of that was good, yeah.
So specifically, we put together a code mod. There were additions like roll-in showers on the accessibility side. There were additions like low-level exit signs in the corridors for something that's more akin to a hotel use. But we worked through that with ISD.
Interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Giacomini. Are there any other questions from commissioners? All right, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Siegel for a motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Schroll. I move the Planning Commission recommend the County Board adopt the site plan amendment ordinance residential project attached to staff report dated January 8th, 2019, to allow a temporary conversion of up to 175 units from residential use to hotel use for up to 2 years, subject to all previous approved conditions, revised conditions number 32 and 42, and new condition number 64.
Is there a second? I saw Commissioner Giacomini first. Ms. Bowling. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Weir.
I guess I just want to say that my initial reaction to any proposal that would take housing off of the market is skeptical, but I have been persuaded that this is actually a very interesting and potentially novel and hopefully successful model. So I'm inclined to support it, but I just want to share with my fellow commissioners that I think a first principle question we should always be asking is, how does this affect the current supply of housing in the Arlington market? I don't think that, I'm not saying that because I think that there's a wrong answer for this particular motion. I just want to encourage my fellow commissioners to be thinking along those lines.
Thank you, Commissioner Ware. Any other comment? Yes, Commissioner Steinberg.
I guess maybe this is more of a question in terms of the timeline, and I apologize if I should have asked this before, but if this is opening for April or May, and the approval point from the county board would be 2 years from that point, is what we're talking about?
Yes, so so in 2 Saturdays, the 26th, it'd be 2 years from that point. So
Okay,
January 26th, 2021, correct? Yes.
okay, just clarifying.
Yes, Commissioner Guerin, and then Commissioner Siegel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to align myself with Commissioner Ware's comments. I laud you for coming up with something so innovative to try to both reach the demand for our changing demographics here, but I was thinking the same way. Wow, if you have this housing that's available short-term, in the future, I wonder if there are other ways we could use it. Sometimes we need swing space when maybe market rate affordable housing is going offline and being revamped. I don't know how something like that would work, but since you're thinking so creatively, I just want to throw that out there for my fellow commissioners to think about and also for the development community.
Thank you, Commissioner Guerin. Commissioner Siegel.
I think Commissioner Guerin expressed my thoughts, so I'll not duplicate them.
Thank you. Anything further? All right. If not, the question comes on the motion made by Commissioner Siegel. All in favor? Ms. Bowling, it's unanimous. Well, thank you to the applicant. Thank you to staff for your presentation tonight. All right, so we're now on to the organizational matters before the commission. May I first get a motion on the adoption of the December 3rd, 2018 minutes? Yes, Commissioner Guerin.
I move to adopt the minutes, assuming the change was made.
Yes, it was made.
Ms. Bowling, can you address which change was made?
Yes, in the draft minutes, it was in the chairman's report. I had put his instead of her, so I changed that in the document we have on file.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Bowling. All right. And I'll note for our new commissioners, when we do adopt the minutes, if you were not present, you just abstain from the vote. So when I call for abstentions, please raise your hand. All right. So all in favor of the minutes with the edit that Ms. Bowling mentioned? All abstentions? Okay. Great, thank you. All right, are there any staff reports?
No.
Great. Site Plan Review Committee, Commissioner Guerin.
I have nothing specific to report at the moment, but I understand we will have a lot of site plans this year. So I encourage you all to generate some enthusiasm, think about where your interests lie and who you'd like to work with, and we'll be in touch.
Excellent. Yes, Commissioner Siegel, carryovers for, okay.
Yes, well, I would just add to that for the new commissioners to look online. New site plan matrix comes out monthly from Mr. Provoca. Have I pronounced his name correctly? So that way you'll be able to see what's in store. I'd also just add that we do expect a lot of site plans to come in, but not yet. Not quite yet. Really more like the spring, maybe even a little later, just to share that with you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Siegel. Zoko, Commissioner, before I go to you, Commissioner Gearin has some
I did.
remarks.
I just wanted to say how delighted I am that Daniel Ware is taking over ZOCO. He showed some genuine enthusiasm for this matter and shadowed me on meetings and contributed very good comments on substance and particulars. He has the sort of attention to detail that's going to be really great for ZOCO, and also the dedication to equity and a lot of enthusiasm for the county's long-term vision to make the changes to the zoning ordinance that make this more of the place that we all want it to be. So congratulations and thank you.
All right, and with that, Commissioner Weir.
Thank you, Commissioner Gearin. I think that you mispronounced condolences, but that was very kind. The next meeting of the zoning committee will be January 30th. It is posted online on the committee's page, along with the agenda, which is one item, the next meeting for the Child Care Initiative, as well as a 14-page, very detailed report from the staff. The subject of the meeting, so we met on December 8th and got a briefing on the generals of the Child Care Initiative. The subject of the January 30 meeting will be the specifics from the first phase of actual recommended changes to the ZO. So come with long gloves or short sleeves because we'll be rolling our sleeves up proverbially, and I hope to see you all there.
Great. And I didn't skip the LRPC report for those watching or following along. We will get to that momentarily. I'd like to go to, okay, well, next up is PFRC. So a couple announcements. One is that Jim Lentelme, Commissioner Lentelme, is the new PFRC chair. So congratulations to, or condolences as the case may be, to Commissioner Lentelme.
Sure. Thank you.
I guess the last announcement I'll make is that we will have one more PFRC on the Ed Center projects, and so that will be a week from today on the 23rd of this month. So a notice should be going out, so if folks are on that or in the BLPC, that'll be again at Washington Lee, or now Washington Liberty. And so I'll pass off to Commissioner Lentelme if he has any other sort of
Not
comments.
yet. I'll be meeting with the coordinator tomorrow, actually, and we'll get to know better what will be on the year's agenda for the PFRC. I do know we have Fire Station 8 coming up.
That's correct.
And there will be no doubt other items either from the county or APS or both.
Yeah, I think Fire Station 8 is coming to you all in the spring of this year.
Right.
The other thing is, if you're interested in serving on PFRC, by leaving PFRC, I'm providing a vacancy, so please talk to Commissioner Lentelme if you're interested in schools projects, public buildings, especially to our newer commissioners, or others who've been kind of wanting to participate. Yeah, Kathleen is the other person who's representing us on PFRC, and if she wants to continue, I think she's gonna do that. So, great. And
Mr. Chair, isn't one of those a board-appointed position?
yes, Commissioner Lentelme.
Oh, you are the, okay.
Yep, it's me. And I was. Okay. And am.
Great.
So, speaking of Commissioner McSweeney, I wanted to see if you have any update for form-based code. I know Commissioner Hughes is not here with us this evening. I don't know if there is one, but I'd like to turn it over to you.
Well, we actually did have a meeting. I was not prepared to actually speak about it. But the Form-Based Code Committee had, as you know, not met pretty much all of last year because staff was otherwise occupied with the Career Center Working Group, supporting that effort, which they did very well. Was anybody else at that meeting? No? Okay. I tell you what, I'm happy to provide an update at next meeting. We did talk about something substantive, but it has completely escaped me.
All right, thank you, Commissioner McSweeney. We look forward to that update. All right, now I'm going to pass it off to Commissioner Giacomini for an LRPC report.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to say that this year, the Long Range Planning Committee will be taking up a variety of subjects. As you know, LRPC, like ZOCO, is a subcommittee of the whole, so generally only PC members are at the table. LRPC, as the name implies, works with overall planning, so not the specific site plans or zoning language. So these are larger plans that create the context for our site plans. The elements of the comprehensive plan all come through LRPC as well as long-range plans like sector plans. So when you guys are thinking about LRPC, I would go ahead and try to start doing some homework, because we are going to see this year application in Shirlington, and of course, at some point, we're going to have activity in Crystal City and Pentagon City, which is covered by what we call a phased development site plan. So what our clerk, Ms. Johnson, handed out this evening are just actually screenshots, if you will, of what's on the county web pages. So one is the link that goes to the comprehensive plan and all of its elements. Another one is the Planning Resource Library, and from there are links to a lot of our planning documents. And another one is the Land Use and Urban Design Projects Land Use, and that has links to phase development site plans, plus historical documents, I should say. So what used to be the old ones, so that you can see some progression. You know, I wasn't on Planning Commission when the last Shirlington PDSP was done, so I know I've had to go back through and start reading. So this isn't about whether you've been on the commission for a week or 2 weeks or 2 years. There's just lots of stuff that are coming up. And I think a lot of times we sort of forget that there are these larger documents that really sort of inform the discussions that we have. So I urge all of us to remember that and to keep and go. Our staff is really, really great in their staff reports about telling us a little of the history, and we do talk about it at SPRC, we talk about it at ZOCO, and we'll perhaps be doing more of that this year, the same at LRPC, but it's really good to get some of the concepts and some of the vocabulary in our heads before we get there. Because all of us are really intellectually curious. There's no doubt about that. You wouldn't be on Planning Commission if you weren't. And a lot of times when we're at meetings, questions come up, things come up that sort of take us away sometimes from the matter at hand. So if we've done some homework and we have questions, ask me, ask another commissioner, ask our staff beforehand. If during a meeting something comes up and whoever's chairing says, that's interesting, but we need to keep on the topic, just note something down and we can talk about it afterwards. Sometimes it takes a little while to get up to speed on things, and so trying to make a meeting a personal learning experience isn't really moving us forward. So there's lots of ways to deal with it, but, I'm telling myself, I've got to start reading more about Shirlington and back about Crystal City. So I just wanted to mention that to my fellow commissioners. So in thinking about being prepared for meetings, one of the updates for the element of the comp plan has been the Open Spaces Master Plan. And that activity has been called POPs. And Commissioner Siegel has been the Planning Commissioner representative to POPs for these, 3 years now? 3 years? So this is a public process that's had lots of meetings and lots of outreach. And I don't know if DPR staff, Caroline, anybody who wants to come up, please do. So Commissioner Siegel and I thought that it might be interesting to have just a little bit of a session tonight to sort of get everybody ready for February. Because in February, we'll have the request to advertise for the POPs plan. And that's where we all get to comment on the draft that will be going forward to the board for them to put out to the public as the advertisement, saying this is the language we think we want to adopt in March. Not sure, people look at it and get back to us. So in anticipation of that, I know Commissioner Siegel has done a little study guide with some things in it. We have with us this evening Irina Laslik from Parks and Rec, who's been staffing it. We also have Caroline Haynes, who's been the co-chair of POPs. So as you've looked at that, Commissioner Siegel can give a few remarks. Staff, I know, is prepared to be brief, as is Caroline. Just to say a few things, and you guys, I know it's always hard. You don't know what you don't know, but sometimes maybe from the guide and just from a little bit of what goes on this evening, you'll know questions you want to ask to have answers for at the meeting in February, or from staff or other people during this interim time as you're really reading the POPs draft. I don't anticipate a discussion this evening because this is the LRPC report. It is not, don't have public testimony, we don't have big presentations from folks. This is just something to start us thinking.
Yes, Commissioner Siegel. Thank you, Commissioner Giacomini.
Thank you, Commissioner Giacomini and Commissioner Schroll. I prepared, Commissioner Giacomini and I did have a brief discussion, and she said the word study guide, and I thought, that's a wonderful idea. This has been a very long process. It has lots of parts to it. There is a framework to it that I don't think we actually touched upon at the LRPC meeting. I wanted to direct your attention to the larger issues of how the document, the architecture of the document, the architecture of the policy. I wanted to give you a sense of the history. There is a separate, but it's kind of a tributary that flows into the major rivers in that the Planning Commission heard the Williamsburg Field Light Working Group report and responded with a recommendation for deferral pending a further work on the public spaces master plan. Let me just get that terminology right. It was just kind of explained to me the other day by Carolyn Haynes, very able co-chair of the 3-year effort. The PSMP, Public Spaces Master Plan, is the document. The POPs, Places for Our People and Spaces.
Plan for our spaces.
Plan for our
Spaces and places.
Places and spaces, that's it, is the process. So just so you won't be confused going through that. My understanding was that, again, we aren't discussing the issues, where I'm just trying to help my fellow commissioners who are extremely, extremely busy and have lots and lots to do to be able to get right to the relevant documents. And I'm very delighted that Commissioner Giacomini has given us this sort of comprehensive plan, set of documents, information that can help us well. So this, I think, is going to help you put a lot of pieces together. Often the work we do here I see as a sort of apprentice learning. You sort of learn as you bump into issues, and hopefully this will prepare you better. I am not going to go through this document that I gave you. It's not a position paper. It's simply a study guide. We will, and I asked some questions, just for transparency's sake, in terms of the I haven't given you strategic directions, but when you look at the table of contents of the document, which you have a link to the PDF, which will allow you to successfully read some of the graphs and charts, you will see two sort of sets of framework lists. One is those of priority actions, which are actions that the working group and the department felt were more urgent and should be acted on sooner than later. The other is strategic directions. So I hope that will help inform your thinking. If you feel, I'm asking, do you think they're comprehensive, necessary, and sufficient, I think is a sort of a philosophical framing for that. All of the ones that are there are necessary to be there, and there's nothing missing. So if you would think about those in that sense. Then there are issues which you may or may not have been aware of, that there was an awful lot of outreach. There's a project page for the POPs, which you can see all the outreach. But we will be taking up, as we normally do, issues that are relatively settled, won't take a lot of our time up. I just ask you to understand those. But issues that have been somewhat contentious and there's a lot of public interest in and positions about, I've listed those as well. We did have an LRPC, and these issues did come up at our LRPC. Level of service, there was a field prioritization point system. I would like to sort of ask us to talk about what context-sensitive development is. There are issues that have come up about community review, community engagement, then casual space, privately owned public space, land acquisition, trails, trail loops, and access to waterfront. Those are the issues. The dog parks and dog runs and some zoning connected with that. Land acquisition, we very briefly all supported more work on TDRs, transfer of development rights, and there would comment on historic preservation. So I just very, very quickly wanted to go through that. For your further study, we will be taking those issues up or others that that you would like to discuss in February.
Thank you, Commissioner Siegel. So I'd like to go to staff, Ms. Lazick and Mr. Beach, for any presentation you might have, and then Ms. Haynes, any remarks you would have for us, and then we'll come back to commissioners for questions. So, Ms. Lazick.
Thank you. We did not prepare a presentation for tonight, but I just wanted to update you where we are in the process and the feedback that we have received on the final Public Spaces Master Plan draft. So, as you mentioned, this has been almost a 4-year process. Our advisory committee was appointed in February of in 2015, so almost 4 years. After all the public engagement that we have throughout this process, our final draft was presented in October of this year. We solicited a lot of feedback from the community. We have 285 comments online and over 50 emails and comments on the 2 open door events that we hosted as part of the review of this document. We also presented this document to over 24, I believe, commissions and different groups and organizations in the county. So we also received a lot of feedback from them. Just also wanted to kind of mention that there are over 170 specific recommendations in this document, and then there are also some more specific detailed recommendations and policy discussions in the appendices section of this document. Just want to also mention that it's very important that this document is kind of reviewed comprehensively, as it is a comprehensive plan element. Not one recommendation should be reviewed out of the context of the rest of the document, because I think that everything kind of there is a context in the document as well. Based on the community feedback, we received a lot of support for many recommendations in the document, but as Commissioner Siegel mentioned, there are still some topics that we keep receiving community keeps discussing some of these topics, and we are currently working on addressing some of the feedback that we received on the final draft. So we're making some edits in the final document, and hopefully that final version will be presented to you in February as part of the RTA discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Beach. Do you have anything to add? Or
No, I don't. Thank you.
Mr. Beach, thank you for being here. Ms. Haynes.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Commissioner Siegel for all of her great work in really trying to frame some of these issues. She and I have spent a lot of time on this. I also want to thank Commissioner Guerin, who continued to serve as the Park and Rec representative when she was appointed by the county manager. In fact, because this process has gone on so long, I think almost everyone on the advisory group has actually kind of rotated off of their commissions, but they've very graciously agreed to continue to serve, and I think that's been very helpful, because that continuity is really helpful, because it is big and long and complicated, and so it's been great to have that continuity. And I also want to thank Commissioner Iacomini, and she and I have had a number of conversations as well, just thinking about how do we refine this, and some of the issues. It is kind of amazing, I think, given how massive this document is, that we're really sort of talking about 2 issues, and so that we still continue to do some additional work on level of service, and also to see if we can think a little more creatively on some of the synthetic fields and lighting on some of the mitigation areas there. So those will continue. We hope to have some additional, refinements on those, but I would be more than happy to talk to anyone else on the Planning Commission, and it is complicated. Would be happy to go through any of those. I know you've been provided the study guide, but if you have any questions, I will just offer myself for a phone call or meeting or whatever would be helpful to walk you through some of these. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Ms. Haynes. All right, a couple comments to kind of, again, frame our conversation tonight, what we're here to do and what we're not here to do. For those who've done SPRCs, this is our wrap-up comments. This is flagging things for next time, asking questions, things that we might have had at LRPC, might have come up through your conversations with other people, that we want to see at the RTA that we're not clear on, or would like more information about, right? So this is not a time to do dialogue. This is not necessarily the moment to say, I came across this piece of the document and you have we need to have an edit on page 213. This is not the time for that. If you have those kinds of edits, reach out to staff. And we also have next month. And so this really is trying to get more information. So I know Commissioner Siegel wants to be recognized, and then I'll certainly pass it off to others.
Yes, this is a question for Ms. Lasik. You said that and I had actually understood this from Ms. Haynes as well, you are continuing some policy development. And my two questions are, can you tell us on what issues so that I can make sure that this is correct, because it reflects the last draft. So that's one. And whether there'll be really any major changes in whatever issues you're still working on, that would be number one. And by what time could we anticipate seeing the final draft? I know work goes on up until the meeting gavel opens a meeting. But if there could be a sort of a heads up, it would, I think, make our conversation a little more relevant, efficient to where you've come out on something, if there's been even a minor change.
So as I mentioned, we have received a lot of comments on the final draft. So we are going through various edits. Some of them are very minor, such as comments that some spelling errors are on a certain page in the document. But we are also considering, we got some more substantial feedback from the commissions that we presented to. For example, making sure that we clearly explain how level services will be implemented in the future. That's one of those. Also some clarifications in the athletic field section as well. So that is based on the feedback that we heard also from the Long Range Planning Committee, some discussion that we had with you as well. So we are trying to incorporate as much feedback as we can. I'm not sure if we are going to be making any substantial changes in the document at this point, but we are going to continue to make some revisions in various topics in the document. So those are not the only two, but there are some other things that we might be
And
editing.
the final you anticipate before our RTA meeting in February, or you don't know?
I'm not sure exactly the date when we can release the final document.
So, sorry. What I would add to that end as far as the timeline, we have obviously a hard deadline with the board report system that would have to be attached to the board report, so be part of the package that came to the Planning Commission for review. If we can have the document out sooner, we will make every effort to do that. There's a lot of moving parts right now, not moving parts in policy or how it's being shaped, but just making sure we get all the edits that we have heard. Irene and her staff have gone through lots and lots of comments, and it is a full-out effort to get the document in time and in a good shape for Planning Commission review for the RTA, and then, of course, a subsequent for the board. So if we can get it out with a preview, we will do that, but obviously we'll most likely probably be on the board report, Planning Commission report schedule.
Thank you. I saw Commissioner McSweeney, then Commissioner Ware.
Thank you. To the extent that the trail loops and that there's been let me start over. To the extent that there's been a change to the bike plan element, I understand that there's an administrative correction that is being made that's been flagged very recently. Could we expect that will actually be in the report for February, in the RTA rather, for February? It's around the 6th Street South part of the bike loop.
So I'm not actually familiar, so I think what I heard you say was that there was a administrative change that's going to the bike
Plan element.
of the transportation master plan. I'm not sure the specific change you're speaking to as far as where 6th Street is. As far as the public spaces master plan, if there is a reference to it that's part of the change or something like that, we will make sure we reach out and coordinate with DES staff to pick up any things that would be appropriate.
Okay, great. I'm just sort of flagging it, I think, for you.
Thank you, Commissioner McSweeney, Commissioner Ware, and then Commissioner Giacomini.
I just want to join the chorus of people giving props to this excellent document. I'm really looking forward to getting through it. I actually do have a question. I don't know that I would ask that you go through it tonight, but it would be nice to have a primer, perhaps by email or at the opening of our meeting, on the relative scope of our recommendations between the RTA stage and the action stage. We've had conversations about this when it comes to what exactly goes into our recommendations and what we can reiterate at the subsequent meeting in terms of our recommendations. And something, this is both for the benefit of our new commissioners, but also selfishly for myself, just to remind us on the sort of nuances and contours of what's appropriate for a recommendation at the RTA stage and what's appropriate for a recommendation at the adoption stage in terms of thinking about our own motions, questions, comments, et cetera. That would be, I think, beneficial and helpful.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. And are you also kind of wondering about where the boundaries are in terms of that too? Of
yes, I
what's
mean,
in and out.
I think that we spent a lot of time. Boy, I can't remember what it was 1 or 2 meetings last year. We spent a lot of time discussing amongst ourselves and asking staff for feedback on these things that, it was appropriate to do so, but if we have some of that information recapped for us beforehand, I think it would help make our meetings go more efficiently when we have these sort of very complicated, large items.
Yes, and so one thing I'll say, and I'll pass it off to Commissioner Giacomini for her question. Commissioner Siegel did a great job, as you noted, of putting together this outline. And she and Commissioner Gearan, who also has been on POPs for a number of years, are both available to talk to you about your questions over the next month. And so I think the advantage of talking about this as a kind of extended discussion tonight in that LRPC report is to flag that this is an element of our comp plan. And it's been a 3.5-year process or what have you. And so, yeah, please come prepared next month. It is a long document. And so, as we've all looked at it at LRPC, and so we'd encourage you all to certainly look at this guide. Certainly reach out to former Chairman Haynes and her efforts to kind of lead this process as well. Jane Rudolph on staff, if you have questions from the staff perspective, or the folks on Ms. Lazick or Mr. Beach. So there's lots of resources to kind of avail ourselves of, and I would encourage you to do that. And so I think you have a follow-up.
Yeah, I don't want you to think that I'm planning on, lobbing any mortars or anything. That's certainly not the case. I just think that sort of bedrock understanding of what specifically an RTA, our recommendations concerning an RTA are, and the nature of our recommendations concerning the ultimate action are, and that they are different things, and what the contours and, what do they have in common, what's different between them. I think that was something that I was very confused about still the last time we talked about it.
Sure.
And with these much more complex things, I think that would be good to have even a refresher that we can consult or not before the meeting if other people feel like they've got a better handle on it.
Yeah, so we'll, in the interest of time tonight, we'll kind of be sure to do that. We have other things to discuss, and I was by no means thinking you were going to come throw any bombs. I was going to go to Commissioner Giacomini, and then I will come back to you, Commissioner Siegel. Okay.
So, Commissioner Weir, I think that's a really good question and a good thing for us to be thinking about, because staff we can get that ahead of time. Just for my 2 cents worth, and I wanted to have this also sort of in the form of the question so that staff can come back to it with their comments in February, is that this informs an element of the comp plan, right? So it is a high-level document. So while, and staff can confirm this and talk about it, and if they would help me in February see it as the comprehensive document, and what parts of it are things that follow on afterwards. So what are we looking for in it, immediate, and what is it that it informs as a policy document of things to come later? And I think that could be part of our discussion in February, that, you know, as an overarching document, we think you still should add this and this, or could you move this around? And then the next steps, we would like to see an implementation, a clear this, this, and this, right? Because that's what this is. This isn't zoning language. So there's also that little nuance that when we advertise actual statutory language, it has to be in a certain box, right? Because once you've advertised it, you can't add to it necessarily or take away. You could take away from it, you can lessen scope, but you can't broaden it. You know, that, I always get confused which one is which, and it also depends upon what area of the code you're looking at. Whereas with an overarching policy document, there's not quite that constraint. But there should be the understanding of what it is it's doing this way and what are the actions that come after, and not to conflate those. So that's what I would like to be very clear about when we get our presentation, because in reading the document, I can see that there's some things that seem like these are steps, but there are other things I want more information on, I think haven't necessarily been fully addressed. But then again, in this document, I'm not so sure they should be. I want to know what the roadmap is.
Thank you, Commissioner Giacomini. Commissioner Siegel.
So in response to both your question and Commissioner Giacomini's response, I would say to that question of what should be in a high-level policy document or not, at the RTA phase, you can set out options. You can have if-then statements. If X is missing, should it be in the document, or should it be follow-on and elsewhere? So at the RTA stage, you can have options that you then circulate within the community. They can provide feedback, and then at the final stage you say, aha, it's option A that we like. That is one example. But as Commissioner Giacomini says, it's a policy document, a little, pardon the technical term, but squishier than a zoning scoping action. But sometimes the zoning can kind of give you an idea about that. The other thing I would just say is I tried to, with my framing questions, suggest some scoping questions. What should be in the scope of our discussion? And we'd absolutely love it once you, thank you for your generous remarks about the document. Once you read it, give me some feedback about that, and so we can really be prepared for an efficient discussion in February, which was kind of the point of this.
Thank you, Commissioner Siegel. Are there other questions? Commissioner Guerin.
I want to underscore Commissioner Giacomini's comments about when you look at this large document with the study guide that's been prepared, to be thinking about what does belong in a plan at this level, and where there are still areas that have eluded consensus, or where when we read it we think, how will this help us in the area, for example, of SPRCs, when we're trying to provide some guidance, what goes here, where there's a need in the neighborhood. If there's something that's missing, is it missing from the plan, or is it missing as something that's sort of an attachment, as Commissioner Giacomini has suggested? So be thinking at that level of this. And then I also wanted to underscore my willingness to meet with anyone who wants to talk about this, since we were appointed to this in 2015. So it's been a few years. I can condense all of that into, a few hours for you. Thanks.
Well, we thank you for that. Are there any other people who want to be recognized to kind of ask staff questions? Okay. Well, I do want to thank staff for making the time, and Ms. Haynes for being with us this evening, and for kind of all your work over the last few years on this project and process. So, and we look forward to seeing you the next 2 months as we continue to discuss this matter. But thank you for all being here tonight.
Chairman Schroll?
Yes, Commissioner McSweeney.
My memory has kicked in, and if you would indulge me, you don't have to wait till next month to hear what we talked about in the
That sounds
form-based
great.
code.
Thank
Okay.
you, Commissioner McSweeney. Take it
Thank
away.
you. I just needed a few minutes. So at the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group meeting that we had about a week ago, we actually discussed the Career Center Working Group and the recommendation, funny that I would forget that, and the recommendations that were made by the working group. We also heard a brief presentation from the Y Hotel folks on the proposal to put 164 hotel units at the Centro, which is what they're calling now the intersection of, the development at the intersection of South George Mason and Columbia Pike. Thank you. We also, then there were a couple of new people, actually, I think, as part of the committee. So Matt Matusek, who's the staffer, entertained a lot of questions about the form-based code and the differences between the form-based code for the commercial centers and for the neighborhood plan, because as you know, there are actually two form-based codes on Columbia Pike. And then also an explanation of, by right versus site plan versus form-based code, and the fact that you could opt in, and it's actually an opt-in option for form-based code. It's not something that people actually have to do. And so that was actually the meeting.
Teaching people about overlay districts. That's great. Well, thank you for that update. That's great. All right. For my chairman's report, I kind of have one matter, which is honoring our outgoing chair, Commissioner Siegel, and presenting her with this gavel for her wonderful work over the last calendar year. So thank you, Commissioner Siegel, for your work. Thank you for your work as our chair, also updating the Citizens Guide. That was, as we said, yeoman's work in December that we recognize that work. And I think you have copies of it for us this evening. I think they're at the dais with us. So thank you for your efforts there, and your continued work on POPs and other things. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you really very much. I really enjoyed working with every one of you. I learned a lot, but I'm really glad that you have the operational gavel right now and not me.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Siegel. All right. So at our desk, we have, I think it was a draft of the 2018 year-end report, Ms. Bowling, and we won't be adopting this until next month. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so this is a chance for folks to look at this. If you did have a chance to look at it this, prior to tonight and have edits, good time to highlight them for us. Also, if you see them later, please send them to myself and Ms. Bowling and Ms. Johnson so that we can capture those. So are there any edits, Ms. Siegel?
I just have a question on pages 3 and 4. The totals column, where the following table site plan form-based code, that's been filled out, the totals column on page 3, but you can't really total.
No, yeah, that's
Yeah?
that on page 4 for the community benefits. This chart, I guess you could call it, is still kind of a work in progress. I'm working with the planners and Aaron just to make sure I have this correct from what has happened over the last year. If we kind of keep it in the same format that it is now, I'm going to take that totals column out because it doesn't, you can't really total anything up if things aren't all numbers. So I'll take another look at that this week. And if you guys have any feedback based on what, you guys saw, because I wasn't here the whole year, so I've been kind of piecing together all of 2018. So just let me know if you see anything or recall anything specifically from those projects.
And I guess just one more follow-up.
Yeah.
There's no indication here of a concept review. I know that's the only concept review that we participated in or had anything really to do with was the Harris Teeter site, because Commissioner Schroll and I did meet, but that's really living in the staff level.
Yeah, I would say, because it wasn't
not involved.
Right.
Yeah. Hopefully down the line, if those, what the result was that if there is a public report some of the concept reviews, the applicant kind of bows out and does not ask for any feedback. But if the applicant does, in the concept review, ask staff for feedback, then there's a public report, which we are free to read because it's public.
Yeah, after, if there's ever a final filing made of the site plan.
But you would not then put that in final report because there's no work, really.
Right, yeah,
It's not a meeting of the planning commission.
Yeah.
And not necessarily our work products. But good highlight on the totals. Other edits? Okay. Well, if you see any, please send them to Ms. Bowling, myself, and Ms. Johnson. And we'll see this again next month in our packets, so we'll see
Yep.
this again.
yeah, if you could get me any edits, you know, a week or so before distribution, just so I have time to get that final document together, that would be great.
And please remind folks, distribution is usually the Friday before,
Yep.
Thursday or Friday before.
Giselle? Yeah,
Okay, so Tuesday, a week before the Tuesday before distribution. So. Okay,
I'll send out an email reminder, just so we all know.
week before the Tuesday before. All right, so we're moving on to the adoption of the commission schedule for 2019. You should have a draft before you. It should look like this. Do I have a motion?
Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, I move that the commission adopt the proposed planning commission meeting schedule for 2019 as expressed in a document dated 9 January 2019.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner McSweeney. Any discussion? Commissioner Siegel.
Sorry,
You're up, sorry.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was a modification, I believe, in October for Jewish holiday, correct? You changed the, I asked about that on email. I think you responded, and I'm now, the dates. It was changed. Okay.
Change.
Yeah.
There's a, as you see at the bottom of the schedule, it tells you specific dates.
Great.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right, any other discussion or comment? All right, hearing none, the question comes on the motion made by Commissioner Giacomini, seconded by Commissioner McSweeney. All in favor? All right, carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, so there's a board agenda going around. I think people are, so this is for commissioners to sign up to go to represent the PC at the county board. I think it's over next to Commissioner Weir as it comes around. So the responsibility as planning commissioners should try to sign up for 1 month to present to the board. We have, thankfully, 12 members of the planning commission now, so sorry to Commissioner Hughes, he gets what's left over. Oh, that's right. What's right? We don't meet in August. Yes, good point as well. Commissioner Guerin reminded me that the month you are going to the county board is the month you bring planning commission snacks. So, right, which is what I did tonight, and brought extra cookies for folks. So please eat them, or I'll take them home. So please sign up for that. If in an event you signed up for something and you need to switch, that can happen. So you have to go away on a business trip or some family matter, that's fine. Please reach out to us. Please reach out to me, Commissioner Guerin, just to let us know that you're going to do that, and obviously Ms. Johnson, to let her know. Yes, Ms. Johnson.
So on the schedule that I sent out, there were some questions about why I had 2 separate dates for the July Planning Commission. I think we all know the county board revised their schedule to reflect an earlier date for the July county board dates, which is the 13th and 16th, which pushed Planning Commission back a week to the 1st and the 3rd. But I just want to make sure that those dates were okay with everyone, since that is the day before the 4th of July holiday. And Tuesdays are recommended, it's recommended that we don't have PC on a Tuesday because the board has their county board work sessions.
Sure.
So were those dates acceptable? Okay.
July dates.
July.
If we didn't have those dates, we couldn't push them forward, we'd have to push them back into June, is that correct? So we'd end up having 2 meetings in June.
Right.
That's correct. You
Right.
can just let Giselle know, and we'll see.
Yeah.
It'll be a real problem if 7 people are absent.
Yes, so please, yes, if a number of you have conflicts, we need to probably know right now. So if you do have a conflict, we need to know this evening. If 1 or 2 of you do, as it is like kind of right before a holiday, understand. And yes, you can be absent several times. Our bylaws kind of call out how many times you can be absent and still kind of remain a commissioner. So it's several times a year. So please kind of look at that as well. So any other discussion? Okay. Hearing none, the question comes on the motion for the Planning Commission meeting schedule for 2019. All in favor? All right, that's unanimous. Thank you.
Oh, James?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, just let me say, too, that as you prepare to be in front of the county board, you report for all of us. Sometimes, if there's been a site plan, the person who's chaired that SPR, that site plan, might come as well to serve as a resource, because obviously they know it well. There's not an obligation. I'm just saying that traditionally that has happened, and sometimes it's really helpful. The other thing is that you'll want to make sure that you get the final Planning Commission letter on each subject, so you can ask the chair or Ms. Johnson to make sure you get a copy of it. And then usually it's sort of tradition that after the meeting, either after the Saturday or then after Tuesday, or if you want to wait, you just do a little overview email to all of us to say, hey, if you didn't see it, the board passed this 3-2 or this 5-0, and the couple points they brought out that might be of interest to us in the future were, X, Y, and Z. It doesn't have to be this exhaustive thing. We can all watch it on TV if we want to and see the blow by blow, but just, sort of as informing all of us, it's really helpful.
Another point I'll make, thank you, Commissioner Yakamini, that's great. For our new folks who haven't presented to the board yet, is I would encourage you the month before you go, or in the months before you go, to at least watch a county board meeting or come and attend one for a little bit and see how planning commissioners present to the board. Ask us for tips, those of us who have done it several times, but I would certainly just kind of watch one and see that as well. Commissioner Siegel.
And also for the new folks, you may or may not know this, meeting notes are taken by our staff person. She formulates the notes into a letter, which is a draft. That goes to the person who was responsible. If it's Pops, I guess it'll be Elizabeth and I, or it'll be me. Then we circulate that letter to all the planning commissioners. If you have said something that was summarized in a way that didn't quite capture it, or it's not there, something you said, then you can add it to the letter. What you can't do in the letter is bring in a subject that was not discussed by you, and you pay particular attention to the way your presentation or discussion points were summarized. That letter then is reformulated and will serve you as your notes when you make presentation to the board. I would only add, we had this little back and forth with Mr. Duffy, board members can ask you anything they would like, and they often do ask things that are not explicit in your letter. And you should respond as accurately as you can. If a board member says, as Mr. Weisstad once said, I enjoyed reading the colloquium. And so some of the board members really like to hear the way we handle issues, not just where we ended up. I hope that helps.
All right, thank you. All right, before we get into our last item for the evening, I did fail to introduce our new planning commissioners. So I apologize to our new planning commissioners for that, but we would certainly like to welcome Devanshi Patel and Sarah Steinberger to the Planning Commission. So welcome. We look forward to working with you all. Please ask us, if you have questions, but we look forward to working with you over the next 4 years. All right, so.
Chairman Schroll?
Yes.
Before we go on to the liaison assignments, I wanted to just note that on the second page, under CPRO, my name should not be there. Actually, Commissioner Guerin took over last year, and so I just wanted to make sure people knew that that was not an assignment that I was doing.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner McSweeney. And a good segue into some other things I want to point out to folks, sort of things to fill in on their liaison assignment 2019 that are not necessarily available. Commissioner McSweeney noted that Commissioner Guerin, if she still wants to, is serving, and I don't know if you want to still serve as CPRO.
I have a very hard time making those meetings.
Okay, well then that remains open. But on the first page, as we noted in the PFRC report, Commissioner McSweeney is one of the planning commissioners serving for the Public Facilities Review Committee, and the other appointment for that is up to the determination of Commissioner Lantelmi. It's his decision, so that's not a decision we get to make this evening. If you see the ones that say CB, so if you go to page 3, the Crystal City Citizen Review Council is a county board appointed positions. That's not before us this evening. The form.
That's me.
Commissioner Siegel will continue that on. CM is county manager, so if you go down that page, the form-based code working group, I think that still is Commissioner Hughes. Commissioner McSweeney, is the other position one you can sign up for? I believe it is, right? The other one here. So, yes, we would like you to do that if that's your desire. And so, and then I guess the last one to note is on page 5, the Transportation Commission. That's Commissioner Lantelmi again. That's a county board appointed position. So, with those edits, I'll run down sort of how we do this. We do this by order of seniority. So we'll go down the list. I know for the folks who just got appointed, that's not great news. But what we'll do is we'll go from Commissioner Giacomini, who's our most senior member, down to our most junior members. I have where folks are appointed on the same day. I've just done it alphabetically. So I know, I'm sorry, Ms. Steinberger, but that does not work out great for you. Yeah. So Commissioner Ware can share that with you. I have an S name too, so I feel your pain. Oh, do a snake draft? Okay. Well, so I'm going to, I guess the last thing I'll say before passing it off to Commissioner Giacomini is it is okay to pass. So if you think your plate is full, it is okay to pass to others. These are liaison assignments, so the expectation here is if you're free, there isn't a planning commission thing on the agenda, you have an open night, please try to attend these, please try to keep tabs on what's going on with these commissions or groups. But if there's a conflict and there's a PC thing that night, please come to the PC thing. We want you there first. Please, that's your first priority. It is okay to skip these if you need to. It is also okay to say, yes, I have enough liaison assignments, I'm going to pass. So that's okay as well. So with that, yes, questions?
Question, if there's no set meeting time identified for one of these, does that mean the meetings are ad hoc? Or there are no meetings?
So some of them, like on the first, yeah, so a lot of these are ad hoc. So with the sector plan ones, they were different times. I think that would be sort of the main one. Those would be ad hoc.
But for example, TC is scheduled.
Correct. TC is scheduled. A lot of the commissions, Arts Commission, those ones are more scheduled. Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions? Commissioner Giacomini, take it away.
Rosalind Bid.
Roslyn bid for Commissioner Giacomini.
Can I just ask that people say what page it is on, just so that we can,
It was page 4. All right. It was page 4 for the Roslyn bid chosen by Commissioner Giacomini. Commissioner Siegel, you're next.
The EDC, the Economic Development Commission.
Page is 3. All right, it would be Commissioner Hughes, but he's not with us. No, but I'm not going to try to take things I think he might want. So I'm up next. What's my list here? I want to take EPAC, which is Emergency Preparedness Advisory Commission. It's on page 3. All right, Commissioner Gearin. On page 5. All right. Commissioner McSweeney.
Page 3, JFAC.
Sorry.
Commissioner Lentelmi. Can you please turn your microphone on?
I'll take both the Lee Highway Study on page 1 and the Lee Highway Alliance on page 4.
I think you can only pick one.
The time? Okay, I'll take the
Time,
study.
Commissioner Lentelmi.
And the
You went for a double word score. I don't think you can do that.
thing, so that's the only reason I raised it. Right.
So maybe.
The Lee Highway Study on page 1.
Commissioner Lentelmi, aren't you already appointed to that
Yeah, from
from
before.
PC?
Karen.
Weren't you already appointed to the Lee Highway Study for the Planning Commission?
Though it's not a CB appointment, but it was by the county manager.
All right, so no, he's already has that. So, yes, no, if the commission can please,
Wait, since I already am on that, then I get to choose. So I choose Lee Highway Alliance, so I get to vote.
okay, so Commissioner Lentelmi was previously appointed to the Lee Highway Study by the county manager. So page 1 should reflect that Commissioner Lentelmi, there should be a CM there, and there isn't. So Mr. Lentelmi can then therefore choose the Lee Highway Alliance, which is on page 4. And then it's, well, yes, Commissioner Siegel.
I just wanted to make a comment. You don't have to do this. The process has been established, and you can take what you like based on seniority. That does not mean that other commissioners cannot engage in processes of interest to them. So that's one way to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. These are all public meetings, of course.
The other way is to welcome somebody else working with you on that as a second and even being the formal liaison. But I'm just make that as a suggestion.
Yeah, I'm happy to have anybody who wants to join me on anything come along. Please do.
Okay, Commissioner Ricks.
All my preferences got picked. I'll select NCPC. Page 4, National Capital Park and Planning Commission.
All right,
National Capital Planning Commission.
National Capital Planning Commission. Commissioner Weir.
staying on page 4, NAOP.
Yep, great. NAOP, top of page 4. Commissioner Morton. I don't believe so.
Nope.
Commissioner Morton, Crystal City bid, bottom of page 2. Commissioner Patel. Arts Commission, top of page 2. Commissioner Steinberger. All right. Back to the top, Commissioner Akamine. Commissioner Siegel.
I was doing this last year.
There you go.
The Arlington, Alexandria, Forma Run, let me try to find it.
Yep.
Page
Page 1.
1, Arlington, Alexandria Joint 4 Mile Run Task Force.
It's a task force in need of an acronym. Okay, Commissioner Hughes, and then Commissioner Schroll. Okay. I'm gonna pass right now. Okay, Commissioner Guerin.
I'm going to put my name down for POPs again, since I'm on it.
But you're already, that's a point pre-appointed. You're already
Yeah,
on.
POPs probably shouldn't be on there because it's a continuing they're continuing appointments.
It would make sense, though, wouldn't it, for you to be in that? I mean, these are the liaison roles. We're not ex officio members of any of these.
You know what, okay, so I'm going to write down POPs, and if you want to consider that taking a turn or passing, I'm just going to throw, because it's one more thing I'm signing up to liaise for.
Yes, Commissioner Siegel and Commissioner Guerin are sort of our liaisons to that process, so thank you for that. Commissioner McSweeney.
Despite what I said before, I think I'm going to go back to CPRO, page 2.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner McSweeney. Commissioner Latelmi.
I think I'll pass.
Commissioner Ricks.
Clarendon Alliance.
Clarendon Alliance, page 2.
Correct.
Commissioner Ware.
I'm just going to ask a question of my fellow commissioners in the interest of managing workload. I'm interested in E2C2, but if anyone has done that and wants to tell me now that that's maybe biting off a little bit more than I want to chew as the ZOCO chair and a new father and also NAOP, then I would welcome the suggestion that I pass.
I have a comment.
Commissioner Siegel.
We really are going to have a lot of work this year. However, you can stay in touch with the chair, find out what the issues are that will come before them, and not feel that you have to attend every meeting or cover every issue, and can selectively choose which issues you think are important to the Planning Commission.
Yeah, the other thing I'll mention is we do have one commissioner who's not with us this evening, and so
Leave some good stuff for him.
I would I'm leaving some things that I might want to do, and also to deference to other folks here, and I would also kind of note that we're one shy this evening. So if you're on the fence about it, I might leave.
It does sound like something I would be very interested in and would really like the opportunity to learn more about, but I think I'm going to pass. Thank you.
Yep. Commissioner Morton.
You're collecting bids.
Commissioner Morton with the steel.
Page 2.
Bolson bid, page 2. Commissioner Patel. Pass. Commissioner Steinberger.
Please speak into the mic. Thank you.
Has anyone done the pedestrian, that one, before? What was that experience like?
Yes, Commissioner Siegel.
I just want to say that, can somebody remind me of the name of the,
I'm sorry, did Commissioner McSweeney, did you say that you were on pedestrian advisory last year? I didn't think you'd finished your thought.
I did, thank you, Commissioner Giacomini. The unfortunate part was that I had a meeting that actually conflicted with every one of theirs. So I actually just communicated with them by email, but actually didn't receive a lot of communication back, I would say. So I think we should try again.
I will note that their meeting will likely conflict with our meeting every month if we have a carryover. So I'm guessing that's the meeting you had that was in conflict? Yeah.
Well, and sometimes, just because they're every second Wednesday, we won't necessarily be every second Wednesday. So,
and I
just like E2C2 is Monday nights. So, again, as the chairman had said, sometimes with these things, we need to keep in touch by introducing ourselves to the chairman, by getting their minutes, looking at various things, so that, or else it would just be impossible to have any liaison. So it's just done in a slightly different way.
That's absolutely right.
Sorry, point of clarification, do they meet in this building?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take pedestrian advisory committee.
For 400.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Steinberger. Commissioner Giacomini.
I continue to pass.
Mr. Siegel.
give me 1 second. I think that I will also pass.
I'm continuing to pass. Commissioner Guerin.
Three.
Housing, page 3. Housing on page 3. Commissioner McSweeney.
On the top of page 3, is Commissioner Siegel the person who's appointed to the Crystal City Citizen
Yes.
Review? Okay. All right. I am going to pass.
Commissioner Lettelme.
I'll pass too.
Commissioner Ricks.
Pass.
Commissioner Weir.
Pass.
Commissioner Morton. No, I think we are getting to that point where we should sort of leave them kind of in deference to Commissioner Hughes. So unless you have a really strong desire, I would encourage folks to leave them. Is that a pass from Commissioner Morton? Commissioner Patel.
Pass.
Commissioner Steinberger.
Pass.
All right, so we kind of passed around back to the top. Commissioner Siegel and Commissioner Giacomini are both passing.
Yes, passing. I would just point out, we don't have someone for Parks and Recreation. We might want to.
Yes,
Well-
I think the idea is to ask Commissioner Hughes if he desires that, and then ask the remaining commissioners if they have a strong desire. I think that you're absolutely right. It's a commission we want to be engaged with, but I don't think we will not be engaged with that, knowing that there's a former Parks and Rec commissioner here, others who have expressed interest in that. So you're certainly raising a good point, but I think we will endeavor to kind of close that hole if it exists.
And I think, and Madam Clerk can correct me, but while it's good for us to do this at the beginning, giving Commissioner Hughes his choice and then coming back for another round, say in February, is certainly doable.
Yep. Yeah, there's no requirement. We just do this because it's the first thing out of the year, so to make sure we have covering all the bases, but yeah, there's no requirement that we do this at our first meeting. So if there's nothing else before the commission, we stand adjourned.
How often do the Lee Highway people meet?
Did you sign your, I'm not going to keep it.
Nothing?
I mean, the Lee Highway,
Absolutely.
Yes.